When I think back to that journey, I still remember the feeling of stepping into something completely new. It was not just about traveling to another place. It was about opening a door to a different world, a world I had only seen in pictures or read about in short stories. The idea of Paris had always lived in my imagination, but when the moment came to go there for the first time, the excitement was something I could not put into words. My heart was full, my thoughts were racing, and I knew this trip would be something I would never forget. The journey began with simple steps. Packing my bag, checking the ticket, and preparing for the flight were ordinary actions, but each one carried a special weight. It was not just about clothes or documents. Every small thing I placed in my bag was a reminder that I was about to cross borders and enter a city filled with history, art, and charm. I could not stop smiling, even when I was nervous. The thought of hearing the sound of French all around me, of walking streets filled with centuries of stories, filled me with wonder. When I arrived at the airport, I felt like I was standing at the start of an adventure book. Airports are always busy, filled with people going to different places, but on that day, every movement felt brighter to me. The sound of rolling suitcases, the call of the announcements, the lines of travelers, all of it seemed to whisper the same thing: you are going somewhere special. As I sat on the plane and felt it rise into the sky, I looked out of the window. The clouds stretched endlessly, and it felt like the earth was slowly letting me go so I could meet Paris face to face. The first sight of the city came even before I landed. Through the window, I could see lights shining like tiny stars spread across the land. Somewhere among those lights was the place I had dreamed of, the Eiffel Tower, the symbol of Paris. I could not see it clearly yet, but just knowing it was there filled me with excitement. My hands pressed against the glass as if I could somehow pull the city closer. It was a moment when dreams began to take shape, when imagination slowly turned into reality. Stepping out of the airport, I felt the air of Paris for the first time. It was cool, carrying a mixture of city life and something I could only call elegance. The signs were written in French. The voices around me carried a rhythm I was not used to, and even the sound of the taxi horns felt new. I was in a place where everything was both unfamiliar and inviting. The journey had truly begun. Every little thing amazed me. The streets looked different from the ones I knew. The buildings stood tall with designs that seemed like art carved into stone. Cafes lined the sidewalks, and people sat outside, sipping coffee, as if time moved more slowly here. I wanted to stop at every corner, to look, to listen, to remember. This was not just about seeing a city. It was about feeling alive in a way I had never felt before. I carried a notebook with me, and on that first day I began to write. Not long sentences, just simple words, beautiful, new, excited. These were not only English words, but also reflections of my heart. Traveling to Paris was teaching me more than just culture. It was showing me how language connects to emotion, how every word I wrote became a memory I could hold on to forever. The first journey into the city made me feel both small and big at the same time. Small because the streets were vast, the buildings grand, and the history deeper than I could ever imagine. But big because I was there walking among it, becoming a part of the life around me. Every step carried a kind of magic, a reminder that sometimes the simplest journeys are the ones that change us the most. The excitement of that first time in Paris did not come from expensive places or complicated plans. It came from the very fact that I was there, standing in a city I had always dreamed about. It came from the sound of footsteps on cobblestones, the taste of fresh bread in the morning, the sight of lights reflecting in the river at night. It came from moments so small yet so powerful that they stay with me even now. That was how the journey began, not with grand actions, but with simple steps filled with excitement and wonder. When I began telling this story, I wanted it to feel as natural as possible, not just for me, but for anyone listening or following along. That is why I chose to use easy words and short sentences. Simple language makes it possible to focus on meaning without feeling lost. It allows the listener to relax and enjoy the journey rather than struggling with every phrase. I believe that learning English should never feel like a heavy task. It should feel like opening a window and letting in fresh air. Each sentence in this story has its own rhythm, and the words are chosen with care. They are not too long, not too complicated, but strong enough to carry an image, a thought, or an emotion. When I say, "I went to Paris," those 4 words are clear, direct, and full of life. Anyone can understand them, and from that simple beginning, the story grows one step at a time. Short sentences help to build confidence. Each one feels like a small victory, a step forward in learning, and together they create a path that is easy to follow. The beauty of using simple words is that they are powerful. They may look small, but they hold deep meaning. Think about words like home, light, river, or smile. These are everyday words, but they paint strong pictures in the mind. They connect us to feelings and experiences we all share. By filling the story with such words, the language becomes not only easier to learn, but also easier to remember. The words stay with you long after the story is over. Short sentences are like stepping stones across a river. If the stones are small and close together, it is easier to cross without fear of falling. If they are too far apart, the journey feels difficult. In the same way, when learners hear or read short sentences, they move smoothly from one idea to the next. The story feels safe and welcoming, and with every step, confidence grows. This is how learning becomes not just possible, but enjoyable. As I spoke and as I shared the story, I imagined the listener sitting quietly, perhaps with headphones on or maybe reading along with subtitles. I imagined the small spark of understanding that lights up when a sentence is understood, when the meaning becomes clear without needing to translate. That spark is the heart of language learning. It is a moment of connection between the story and the listener. It is the reward that keeps the learner moving forward. I remember the first time I listened to a story in another language. At first it felt impossible. The words were long, the sentences heavy, and the meaning seemed far away. But when I found a story that used simple words, I could finally breathe. I could finally follow along, and the experience gave me courage. That is the same gift I wanted to give here. The chance to feel that English is not a wall blocking the way, but a bridge opening toward new places. Easy words also carry rhythm. They sound natural when spoken aloud. They give the story a musical flow, like gentle waves coming to shore. This rhythm helps the listener remember, even without effort. Sometimes we forget that language is not just about grammar or rules. It is also about sound, about the way words touch the ear and settle in the memory. A short, clear sentence can echo in the mind long after it has been spoken. In Paris, when I first tried to speak even a little French, I learned quickly that short phrases were my best friend. A simple bonjour or merci opened doors. It made people smile, and it helped me feel less like a stranger. The same idea works in English. Short, easy sentences are powerful tools. They allow communication to happen naturally. They bring people closer, step by step. That is why this story is built the way it is. Each line is made to carry meaning without weight, to guide the listener forward without fear of getting lost. It is not about showing off difficult vocabulary or complex grammar. It is about creating a space where learning feels comfortable and alive. By choosing this path, the story becomes more than just a lesson. It becomes a companion walking side by side with the learner. So when I say, I went to Paris, it may sound simple, but it is more than just a sentence. It is a beginning. It is an invitation to keep listening, to keep learning, and to keep moving forward with confidence. When I finally arrived in the heart of Paris, the first thing that caught my eyes was the Eiffel Tower. It stood tall against the sky, so powerful and yet so graceful, almost like a guardian watching over the city. I had seen pictures of it before, of course, but nothing compared to the moment of standing there in person. The iron beams stretched upward in a design that felt both simple and complex at the same time. From far away, it looked like lace made of metal, delicate and beautiful. As I walked closer, I felt the ground disappear beneath me, and all I could do was look up, following its height as it reached into the clouds. The closer I got, the more details appeared. I could see the patterns of the ironwork, strong and endless, built with purpose but shining with art. People stood around me, some taking photos, some simply staring, lost in the same feeling I had. It was not only a tower, it was a dream made real, a reminder of how far human hands and human hearts can go when they create something together. And when I finally stood beneath it, I felt small, but not in a sad way. Small in the sense of being part of something greater, something shared by millions of people who had stood there before me with the same look of wonder in their eyes. When night came, the Eiffel Tower transformed. Lights sparkled across its frame, and the city below glowed with warmth. Every hour, the tower began to shine in a dance of light, and the crowd around me gasped as if it were the first time anyone had ever seen it. I joined them, clapping softly, smiling, and holding on to that moment. The tower was no longer just a landmark. It was alive, breathing, and speaking to everyone in the language of light. Not far from there, I found myself walking along the River Seine. The Seine is not just a river, it is the heart of Paris. The water moved slowly, carrying with it the reflections of bridges, lights, and buildings on its surface. Boats glided across the water, some carrying people for dinner, some filled with quiet laughter, others playing soft music. I walked along the edge, hearing the gentle splash of water against the stone walls, feeling the cool air that drifted over from the river. The bridges over the Seine were each different, each one like a piece of art. Some were simple, others decorated with carvings and statues that told silent stories. When I stopped at the middle of one bridge and looked down at the water, I could see the city reflected below, as if Paris had two faces, one in the sky above and one in the water below. That reflection felt magical, as if the city wanted to remind me that beauty can always be found in more than one way. During the day, the river was alive with movement. Artists set up near the water, sketching scenes of the bridges and the boats. Couples walked hand in hand, their voices blending with the sound of footsteps on the cobblestones. Street musicians played violins and guitars, their songs flowing through the air like another kind of river. Everything seemed to come together, the music, the water, the laughter, to create a moment that felt timeless. At night, the Seine changed again. The water carried the lights of the city like melted gold, soft and glowing. I stood there for a long time, watching the colors ripple and shift with every small wave. The air was cool, but not cold, and I could hear the bells of a church tower far in the distance. It was in those quiet minutes by the river that I felt the spirit of Paris most deeply. The city was alive, but it was also peaceful, inviting me to pause, breathe, and take it all in. Both the Eiffel Tower and the River Seine are famous, but when I saw them with my own eyes, they became more than names in a book or pictures on a postcard. They became part of my story, part of the memory I now carry. They were not just places to visit. They were experiences to feel, moments that live on not only in my mind, but also in my heart. That is the gift Paris gave me, not only sights to see, but feelings to remember. One of the most important parts of my time in Paris was not only visiting the famous places, but also living through the small, everyday experiences that made the city feel real. These moments may seem simple, but they carried lessons that were far greater than I expected. Each one gave me a chance to learn, to grow, and to add new words and expressions to my English in a way that felt natural and alive. The first experience came when I walked into a cafe. Paris is full of them, small and warm, with tables on the street and the smell of fresh bread floating in the air. I sat down at one table, and the waiter came over with a smile. My heart raced a little because I knew I had to speak, and I wanted to get it right. I kept the words simple, a coffee, please. Just 3 words and a polite ending, but they were enough. The waiter nodded, understood, and brought me what I asked for. That moment taught me that even the smallest phrases can open doors. I did not need long, difficult sentences. A few clear words were enough to make me feel part of the world around me. Later, I wanted to try something new, so I pointed to the menu and asked, "What is this?" The waiter explained, and suddenly I had learned not only a new dish, but also a new word. Food became a teacher, and ordering became a lesson. With every plate I tried, I added more words to my vocabulary, words like bread, cheese, soup, fish. These were not just words in a book. They were real, alive, connected to taste, smell, and memory. Meeting people in the city gave me even more chances to practice. Sometimes it was just a simple greeting, like saying hello to a shopkeeper or good evening to someone in the hotel. Other times it was asking for help, like where is the train station? Or how much is this? Each small conversation was a step forward. The people of Paris were patient, and even when I made mistakes, they understood. That gave me confidence, and I began to realize that speaking is not about being perfect. It is about being brave enough to try. One day, I was standing near the River Seine, holding a map and trying to find the right street. A kind woman stopped and asked if I needed help. At first, I felt shy, but then I used the words I knew. "Yes, I am looking for this place." She pointed me in the right direction, and with her help, I learned new words like left, right, and straight ahead. That short exchange gave me more than directions. It gave me the knowledge that every meeting with a person is a chance to learn something new. Exploring the city also added layers to my learning. When I went to a shop, I had to ask for sizes, prices, and colors. When I visited a museum, I read simple signs that described the paintings or sculptures. At first, I did not understand everything, but I understood enough, and that was enough to build from. Each word I recognized gave me joy. Each phrase I understood made me stronger. Paris itself became a classroom, and the city was the teacher. There were moments when I sat on a park bench, simply listening. Children played around me, calling out words I could not always follow, but sometimes I caught one or two. Friends walked past, speaking quickly, but every now and then I understood a simple phrase. It was like finding small treasures hidden in the sound of the city. Those treasures added up, piece by piece, until I began to feel more at home in the language. The lessons of those everyday experiences stayed with me long after I left Paris. They taught me that learning a language does not only happen in classrooms or through books. It happens in the cafe when you order coffee. It happens in the market when you ask for fruit. It happens on the street when you stop to ask for help, or when you smile and greet a stranger. Every one of those moments adds to your vocabulary, not just in words, but in confidence and understanding. That is why I believe everyday life is the best teacher. It takes what is simple and makes it powerful. It turns small actions into unforgettable lessons, and it shows us that learning a language is not just about speaking. It is about living. When I think about that journey, what stands out most are not just the places or the words I learned, but the feelings that filled every step along the way. Travel has a way of opening the heart, and Paris was no exception. Each moment felt like a discovery, as if the city was whispering secrets only I could hear, and I carried those whispers like treasures. The wonder of being in a new place is not something you can always explain, but you feel it deeply, like a light glowing inside you. Every street I walked down was a discovery in itself. Sometimes it was a quiet corner where ivy climbed the walls of an old building. Sometimes it was the sound of a violin being played on the street, notes floating in the air like magic. At other times, it was simply watching people go about their day, noticing how they moved, how they spoke, how life in this city had its own rhythm. Each detail, no matter how small, made me stop and look closer. It was as if I had been given new eyes, and the world around me had been painted fresh. The feeling of wonder followed me everywhere. It was in the taste of bread that was still warm from the oven, in the sight of a flower shop bursting with colors, in the way the lights danced on the river at night. It was in the laughter of children running in a park, in the quiet footsteps on old stone paths, in the bells that rang from a church tower as the sun began to set. These moments might sound ordinary, but when you are in a place that is new, they become extraordinary. They remind you that beauty is not only in the grand monuments, but also in the smallest details of life. Travel has a way of teaching you about yourself as much as about the place you visit. In Paris, I learned that discovery is not just about finding new streets or new buildings. It is about finding new parts of yourself. When I tried to speak, even with mistakes, I discovered courage I didn't know I had. When I got lost and then found my way again, I discovered patience and resilience. When I stopped to listen, I discovered how much joy can come from silence and observation. These discoveries were just as important as the city itself, because they stayed with me long after the trip was over. The beauty of learning through travel is that it does not feel forced. You are not sitting at a desk memorizing words. You are out in the world, living, breathing, and feeling. The lessons come to you naturally through sights, sounds, and experiences. A simple sign on the street becomes a new word. A short exchange with a stranger becomes a new phrase. A moment of wonder becomes a memory tied forever to the language you are learning. The mind remembers better when the heart is involved, and travel makes sure the heart is always awake. There were times when I would pause and just let the feeling of wonder wash over me. Standing at the top of a hill, looking at the city spread out below, I felt a mix of excitement and peace. The rooftops, the bridges, the endless lines of streets all told stories of people who had lived, loved, and dreamed there for centuries. I felt small, but in that smallness, I felt connected to something greater. That is the beauty of discovery. It reminds you that you are part of a world much bigger than yourself, and yet you belong to it. Even when the day was over and I returned to where I was staying, I carried the wonder with me. I would write down a few words, simple notes about what I had seen or felt, and each time I did, I realized I was not only writing a travel memory, I was writing a learning journey. The discoveries were not just about Paris. They were about language, about connection, about the beauty of noticing the world more closely. That is why the feelings of discovery and wonder are at the heart of this story. They are what make learning through travel so powerful, because when you combine the joy of exploring a new place with the process of learning, Every lesson becomes alive. Every word becomes part of your own experience, and every moment becomes unforgettable. And that is the true gift of travel. It teaches you that the world is full of beauty, and the more you discover, the more you learn about both the world and yourself. When I began sharing this story, I wanted to make sure it was easy to follow, even for someone just starting to learn English. That is why the words are simple, the sentences are short, and the rhythm is steady. But simplicity does not mean emptiness. Behind each word there is life, and behind each short sentence there is a piece of adventure. The balance between easy language and an engaging story is what makes this journey both comfortable and meaningful. For a beginner, every word counts. When the sentences are too long or filled with difficult expressions, it is easy to feel lost. That is why I chose to build this story step by step, like walking through a new city with a clear map. Each phrase is like a street, guiding the listener toward understanding. But as the story unfolds, it also carries a sense of adventure, of traveling to new places and living new experiences. That way, learning does not feel like studying. It feels like living. When I said, I went to Paris, the words were simple, but they opened the door to a whole adventure. From that single sentence, we moved to cafes, bridges, rivers, and towers. Each scene used words that were clear and familiar, but together they created something larger than the words themselves. That is the beauty of a graded reader. It respects the learner's level, but still gives space for imagination to grow. This story is light enough to follow, but rich enough to inspire. Think of it like walking up a gentle hill. The path is smooth, not steep, so you do not get tired, but as you climb, the view becomes wider and brighter. With each step, you see more of the world. That is how a story written in simple English works. It feels easy, but with every page, with every sentence, you are reaching new heights of understanding. And when you reach the end, you realize that you have learned much more than you expected, without even noticing the effort. The adventure itself makes the learning stronger. A journey through Paris, filled with sights, sounds, and feelings, is not just a set of vocabulary words. It is an experience. When I described the Eiffel Tower shining at night or the River Seine reflecting the city lights, those images stayed in your mind, and because the words were easy, they stayed with you too. The story makes the vocabulary memorable, and the vocabulary makes the story come alive. The two walk hand in hand. Even for beginners, adventure matters. It keeps the heart awake. If a story is too plain, even simple words cannot hold attention. But when there is discovery, when there is wonder, when there are moments of surprise and beauty, the mind stays engaged. That is why this story is not only simple, but also rich with images, emotions, and small discoveries. Every cafe, every meeting, every step on the Paris streets adds to the adventure. And because it is told in clear language, no learner feels left behind. There is also comfort in knowing that mistakes do not take away from the journey. When beginners listen to a graded story, they do not need to understand every single word perfectly. They just need to catch the flow, the feeling, the rhythm. The story carries them forward gently, allowing space for learning to happen naturally. Sometimes understanding comes slowly, but that slowness is part of the adventure too. It shows that language is not just about speed, it is about connection. And so, this graded reader becomes more than a tool. It becomes a companion. It speaks simply, but it speaks with meaning. It does not push too hard, but it also does not hold back from giving beauty. It respects the learner, knowing that even at the first level, the joy of a good story can be shared. And in the end, the learner walks away not only with new words, but with memories, feelings, and a stronger desire to keep learning. That is why the story of going to Paris is told in this way. It shows that even with the simplest words, you can live the greatest adventures. Thank you for sharing this journey with me, step by step, through the streets, the stories, and the discoveries of Paris. I hope these simple words and moments of wonder have made learning feel lighter and more alive. Until we meet again in the next story, keep exploring, keep learning, and keep believing in the beauty of every small adventure.